Am I audible? Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Very good afternoon. So today's session on study designs relevant for research question will be taken by Dr. Amol Patil. He is Associate Professor at Department of Pharmacology, PGI, Chandigarh. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Very good afternoon, everyone. So today we are here to discuss study designs relevant for the research questions. So when we think about study designs, okay, why you need to pay attention to this class, or why we need to discuss study design? You know, there is a difference in Indian journals and the Western journals. Okay, the studies published. Why do we follow NEGM like a hell? I mean, why do we follow all the treatment guidelines mentioned in one particular set of journal or a few journals? I would say because of the study design, because of their level of statistics they use. Okay, because the data is presented in a well manner, because you know that a randomization like thing can give an extra edge to your research and to the evidence created in the evidence-based medicine, right? So it is a design of the study that matter most, and you should give appropriate thought before starting it. So it is a specific plan that you mention in the protocol to answer a set of particular objectives or the endpoints, right? Okay. That will help you in translating your research question into a directive for other scientists, other researchers, or the clinicians. Whether they will accept your input, your data presented, it's up to them. But how you will present the data in a well manner, okay, that is up to you. So study design is a part that you mention in a study protocol after your introduction, review of literature, aims and objectives. So it requires a extensive scrutiny of the literature, what kind of study designs are mentioned in the literature to answer such a type of queries. Okay, whether they are able for execution here. Okay, whether I have a time constraint. Okay, suppose you are a busy clinician and you are able to spare very few minutes every day for a research. Okay, you don't have ample amount of time, so a study design like a cohort study or a long follow-up study may consume your important time. So it is many factors that decide your study design we will discuss today. Okay, and that will help you in answering your hypotheses. Okay, so basically you ask yourself how much time you are able to spend for finding answer to a research question, whether you can devote a time, whether you can write a grant and get a manpower so that they can help you in a data collection, follow data and everything. Okay, or whether you want to just go to a time point segment and you just want to collect a cross-sectional data. Okay, or you just want to see the past document or the record office of your hospital. You want to visit and collect the data of previous patients and what happened to them and what is a probable association between the etiology and the outcome that you want to derive. That is a retrospective one. Okay, so basic three directions you have: either you go into the past, case record office room, or you go into the future, follow up the patient meticulously with the time and the energy investment. Okay, or you do a simple cross-sectional study to find the answer. Okay, as an ethics committee member, when we get any study for reviewing, we just see the basic things like whether it is asking for any intervention. Okay, why it is necessary to look at the intervention? again, the quality of evidence and quality of the study will be different with the interventional one, okay, than observational one, right? In experimental study designs, you can use randomization, okay. How many of you are actually able to do a permuted block randomization? Can anybody answer? We write generally in the studies that a variable length block randomization or permuted block randomization was performed. Has anybody tried of generating random number for your patient allocation? Yes. Please respond, guys. It is ultimately your benefit we are talking about, okay? I'll show you some methods how to simply do a randomization, okay, or generate a random number for your patient allocation. This is a simple one rand function I'm using in the Excel. Everybody is able to see what I'm doing in the Excel. Please respond, guys. Hello. Hello. Okay, anyways, this lecture is going to be recorded. So I'm mentioning here a rand function, R-A-N-D, rand function in the Excel, and then I enter, okay? Wait. Okay. I close the bracket and I enter, I get a value here, okay? So I can drag this cell to as many as patients they require randomization. Got it? So I have generated here random numbers, and you are keeping, say, block A versus B for randomization. So you have possible sequences like this, okay? Am I clear, guys? Please speak up. Okay, so I'm making as much combinations that are possible, like this. Okay, these are possible combinations you will come across. I now select these few cells, okay, and I format them. Sort them. Sort is here. In any direction you sort. So look at the cells which are got randomly sequenced. You go back and you see what sequence you created. It started with ABBA. Okay, and it had a 6 patient randomization code at the last block. Now what I did is just a sorting function I have used, and I got a variable length randomization block size ranging from 2 to 6. Okay, that is what you are writing in your papers. Am I clear? Okay, so likewise you do it for other patients. Okay, so it is a simple exercise that we did. Okay, let's go back to the presentation. Okay, so a study, whether it is a randomized or not randomized, is very helpful in deciding the level of evidence, quality of the study. Where do we generally do a randomized control trial, guys? when a revised National Tuberculosis Control Program of India gives you update on the pediatric antitubercular drug dosing, they are saying that pyrazinamide dose has to be increased as compared to previous guidelines. Okay. Now you want to compare, okay, the dose recommended by guidelines versus a low dose or a previous dose you want to perform, okay, and you want to follow the patient up in future for say 6 to 9 months. You want to see the sputum conversion, the resistance, the duration of length required for the therapy, all those kind of stuff. Okay, you can keep any endpoints, primary, secondary, safety endpoint, hepatotoxicity endpoints, okay, and you can answer them. Creating a randomization helps you in deciding the pattern of allocation. Okay, it is not already determined. The pattern of allocation, it is not previously determined, it is random. So a bias is omitted out in a randomized control trial, okay, by using randomization. So that is a purpose, okay, that increases the quality because bias is gone. When you do a non-randomized control trial, okay, these are kind of study where you study a particular biomarker and its association with the treatment outcome. Let us suppose, I'm not saying that pyrazinamide dose study cannot happen in absence of randomization. It can happen. Pyrazinamide dose comparison in a non-randomized controlled fashion can also happen. Okay. But generally, I'm saying non-randomized control trial, they are generally used for biomarker studies. Okay, biomarker studies like have you heard N-acetyl transferase mutation, NAT2 polymorphism for isoniazide, slow acetylator, fast acetylator status. Okay, so such a kind of observation. Okay, you take up a blood. It is an intervention. When you take a blood sample from the patient, it is a kind of intervention experiment that you are doing. Okay, whether you are playing with the drug dose, whether you are playing with the patient sample, or any kind of intervention that you are planning on a patient, okay, that is an interventional study, right? So when you go for CTRI, generally it is very important to look at the intervention, okay? So you can answer a biomarker based studies in a non-randomized control fashion, right? So there you can omit out randomization, just the mutation subtype of N-acetyl transferase polymorphism versus the treatment outcome that you can simply mention here. Okay. Coming to the observational part where there is no intervention as such required. Okay. There you do a segregation into comparison, present or absent. Okay. If it is no comparison, simple descriptive without any stats, just mean, median, percentage data that you are presenting. Okay. Suppose you have set up a system for LGBS patients. Okay. And LGBS patients are kind of getting their OPD appointment on telemedicine, okay, or a WhatsApp video calling, and you want to see the pattern of their assessment, whether you are able to provide a sufficient depth of treatment or advice, or whether they are not able to understand that kind of thing, okay, that you can do in a descriptive manner, okay. A descriptive study is a generally, I give you example here. I'll give you example. So this is a descriptive study of just patients of depression who are not being controlled effectively with SSRI. Okay. Whether these patients are shifting from SSRI to SNRIs, okay, whether they are shifting to any other categories, okay, that we have mentioned in the percentage form, and what is the current trend, okay. whether the patient require shift from SSRI to SNRI, followed by SSRI to SSRI. Okay, all these kind of current trend that we can show in the descriptive manner. Okay, these are also a very good type of study. Okay, for other clinicians. Okay, descriptive studies. Okay, they give you idea about the current pattern of the treatment that is going on, what should be followed, what should be effectively done for the patients. Come here to an analytical side, observational but analytical. Okay, in this there are again three types, like a case control study, cross-sectional study, and a cohort study. Like I said, imagine that you have a question that bacterial meningitis cases who were receiving vancomycin had a differential outcome, and you want to assess whether it is a differential drug delivery in the brain of vancomycin that is responsible for a differential treatment outcome. Okay, that you want to study. So you planned sampling of CSF, okay, and you assess them over a period of time. Okay, like that is a one sort of study. Then you have a notion that a particular diet is leading to autism. Okay, so you follow a particular diet or a gluten-free diet patients, okay, over a period of time and see their disease prevalence outcome. Okay, that is a cohort study. Or you can do a 1 point time study. It is not exactly one time point, but it is a small time event. Okay, like 3 months or something, where you assess the risk and the outcome. Okay, you study the autism cases and you study their diet pattern. Okay, that is a cross-sectional one. When you go back from the outcome to etiology, okay, that becomes case control. You interview all autism cases. Okay, what type of diet they were following, and you decide upon the association. Okay, so that is a kind of analytical study you can have. As I mentioned earlier, the level of evidence is different with the non-randomized studies as compared to randomized studies. Okay, level of evidence 1 with a randomized control trial, level of evidence 2A with a non-randomized control trial. Okay. So coming back to the individual type of studies, observational we will do. The descriptive studies, I mentioned we don't do much of statistics, but yes, they can have a statistics, a basic simple statistics involved. Okay. Generally, we report percentage form, mean, median, confidence interval, standard deviation. That is a thing mentioned in the descriptive studies. Okay. There are analytical study, cross-sectional, case control, cohort study, and selecting a control is a big task in any interventional studies. Okay. Talking about COVID vaccine studies. Okay. If imagine that adolescent pediatric population is subjected for Covishield trial, what is an active comparator you will choose? Hello? Am I audible, guys? You want to assess a Covishield vaccine in a pediatric or adolescent population. Okay. One group you will give a Covishield vaccine. Okay. What the other group will receive? Nothing. Placebo. Okay. So if you look into the literature, there are placebo, there are other vaccines mentioned. Okay, so this is a kind of evolutionary subject we are discussing. Okay, we never thought that we will be having such a kind of scenario what we are having, but how to extrapolate the adult data to a pediatric data is a big task, and adult trials are happening in presence of placebo. In comparison to placebo, there is one trial that has happened in adolescent population in comparison to meningococcal vaccine. Okay, so comparison of two vaccines, corona vaccine and the meningococcal vaccine, that they have done, and it is accepted by ethical committee also. Okay, so it is up to you what control arm you select. Okay, and you justify. Okay, it is up to you. Then as per blinding, single blind, double blind, triple blind studies are there when the patient is blinded, when the patient and doctor is blinded. Okay, when the sponsor is also blinded, or the statistician also be blinded. Okay, all those kind of blinding you are well aware. I will comment upon crossover study design. Okay, we will see in depth in next few minutes. Okay, or you can keep a simple parallel arm studies. Okay, the study can happen in the community, the study can happen in the OPD, study can happen in the inpatient service facility, it can happen in the particular lab when we are saying the vaccine experiments are happening over the healthcare workers. Okay, it is a lab study. Okay, so that is a thing. The descriptive studies matching, I'll explain you later. The descriptive studies, they can be of three subtype: case report, case series, or a population based studies. The case report, that is a simple report that you write about your observation. Okay, imagine that you have observed an unusual thing happening with particular drug. Let us see that azathioprine was given to a patient, and you noticed concurrent occurrence of three different outcomes in that particular patient initiated on azathioprine: pancreatitis, polyarthritis, panniculitis. Okay, so what we did is we asked a dermatology opinion for panniculitis, we asked the opinion from rheumat, we asked the opinion from gastroenterologist, and as a clinical pharmacologist, I did the assessment of the adverse reaction. So it is a team approach that you can come up and you can link a drug use to a particular way of outcome occurrence. Okay, right? So where were we? Yeah. So in a case series, imagine that a patient or a healthcare workers, they are receiving a Covishield vaccine. Covishield vaccine may have a thrombotic risk as per small data that is coming up. Okay, it may have a neurological risk profile. Again, association that is not well established. Okay, if you are working in a hospital setting where say 1500 doctors were vaccinated, okay, and 7 of them developed infection after vaccination within 1 week. Okay, so it is a study of those 7 cases, how they developed, whether it was environmentally acquired infection, whether it was a vaccine failure or not. Okay, all these things can be discussed. Okay, in a manuscript consisting of those 7 cases and presentation of each one with the discussion. Okay, population based studies is again a registry type of studies that you can do a population pharmacokinetic study. You see the drug levels achieved with the drug levels achieved for vancomycin or any particular drug. Okay, in a particular age cohort or a population. Okay, and you present the data that is this particular range is a norm for an Indian pediatric patient. See, generally we follow the guidelines recommended by the Western studies, right? Am I right? Okay, the thrice a week antitubercular therapy shifting to daily antitubercular therapy was also a copying decision. I'm saying it frankly. Okay, Western guidelines, they recommended daily therapy for TB long back. and we opted thrice a week regimen, okay, long back, because of economical or compliance issues and other issues. But the thing is, we are ultimately shifting on a daily regimen. So it is a population approach that we have to test whether we are achieving those efficacy result in our population, and we have to answer each research question in our population, because genetic makeup is different, the drug behavior is different in different population with different genetic makeup. Okay. So in descriptive studies, hypotheses are generated, research questions are generated. Okay, a possible association is suggested, not a confirmed one. Okay, these study design, they are easy to do and they help in identifying unusual situation. Okay, and they generate research questions. Okay, the disadvantage is that they may be a short-term studies. Okay, and when you represent 7 cases, pragmatic trial, I will come at the last, guys, please hold on. Okay, so the thing is, I was discussing, when I report 7 cases of vaccine failure, okay, in my campus. Okay, so the way I selected those 7 cases, the timeline I kind of strike off between those 7 cases and the cases happening later on also. Okay, that matters. And why I selected only 7 cases, why didn't I went for 10 cases or 20 cases? Okay, the bias is involved in the descriptive study. Okay, and there is no control when you control arm or a comparator arm. So descriptive studies are just for suggesting an association, not establishing an association. Analytical study, I already mentioned 3 types. Coming to a first one, cross-sectional study. Okay. In a cross-sectional study, data is collected as a single time point or a short time point, I would say. It describes the association. Okay. Like a particular diet, whether it is actually having an association with autism spectrum disorder. Okay. It just gives you an idea about the prevalence. Okay. It doesn't comment upon the incidence, the relative risk, attributable risk, and all those stuff. Okay, so it is a mild kind of evidence that is being developed here. Okay, so you take up a population cohort who is following a particular diet, who is not following a particular diet. Let us say a gluten-free diet. Okay, how many are developing autism? How many are not developing autism? That kind of analysis you do. Okay, and you calculate the prevalence ratio as disease among exposed and disease among non-exposed. 14 divided by 31, that comes 0.45. 388 divided by 636, that comes to 0.61. Okay. So if I ask you to comment upon a figure 0.74, what is your opinion? Whether a gluten-free diet is causing autism or not, whether it is substantially related to autism or not. What is your take on this? Yes. If it crosses 1, then it becomes significant. If it is less than 1, that it becomes insignificant. Okay. So I give you a homework here. Out of 1,000 population, if 100 were doing meditation regularly, and out of that only 2 were having diabetes mellitus, remaining 900 were not doing meditation, okay, at all. Out of that, 220 developed diabetes or having diabetes. Okay, so kindly calculate the prevalence and let me know. Okay, so these kind of study are easy to do, cheaper. They don't require monetary investment or manpower or energy investment. They require a very small time of yours. Okay, and they cannot establish the causal association. They can only just suggest association. Okay, it starts with the people who are having disease, and we have to select the matching controls who does not have association with the outcome. Okay, so autism cases versus no autism cases, that has to be carefully selected. When you select the control, they have to be matched for the age, for the other factors, okay, which might be related to the etiology, but they should not be related to the outcome under analysis. Okay, so that is a thing we have to take into consideration. Okay, and it is a retrospective. You go back to the etiology, assess the exposure. A simple example mentioned here is an case control study of MMR vaccine versus autism. Okay, uh, whether this vaccine is causing or is leading to autism. Okay, these type of questions can be answered. Okay, so you move from present to the past. Okay, those who are having autism, those who are not having autism. Okay, in that who were exposed to MMR, who were not. Okay, and you calculate the odds ratio. Okay, risk ratio, that is. So my idea when deciding upon any study design is a finer criteria that I give. Finer criteria is whether my setting is an ideal setting or enough setting for answering this particular research question. Okay, so feasibility, I see the number of patients visiting to OPD on a daily or monthly basis. Okay, is the flow enough? Is it an interesting research question? Is it something novel? Okay, or is it previously answered? That you have to check. The ethical aspect you have to answer. Like I said, the vaccine trials, they are taking placebo, they are taking other vaccine as a comparator arm. So ethicality has to be justified. And last one is a relevant. Whether the question is really relevant for other clinician and the patients or not. So that is a kind of approach, a finer criteria that I usually adopt. Okay, for any research question, you may also try it. Okay. Coming back to the case control, it is good for the rare outcome analysis, and it examines the relationship with the exposure, generate hypothesis fast, cheap, and provides you a small evidence. Okay. The weakness is it cannot measure incidence, prevalence, okay, relative risk, can only study one outcome. Okay, high susceptibility to bias when you select a matching control. Okay. On opposite side, cohort study, it begins with the disease-free individual. It starts with the exposure. It starts with the etiology. Okay. I will subject the patient on a different type of diet. I will subject my patients on a different type of diet. I will follow them up, say 6 months or a year. I will see the change in the autism spectrum disorder scores. That is a kind of study that I want to plan. Okay, so you have to dedicate time. Okay, to this. You will come up with the relative risk with a particular diet. So cohort is a group of persons sharing a common characteristics. Differences in the rate at which the exposed and control subject contract the disease is due to differences in the exposure. Okay, since others are known and similar, the background similarity has to be assured. Okay, baseline parameters has to be matched. Okay, so cohort studies are prospective. They are well controlled. Controlled meaning that investigator has a full control when to do what. Okay, I mean necessary amendments, rescue treatment, when the patient is landing up into a severe disease in a clinical trial, whether the study medication can be stopped, whether the rescue medication can be given, all those are previously decided in a protocol. Okay, so it can determine the causal associationship, it can talk about the incidence of the disease, it can be a robust evidence for identifying the risk factors, okay, as compared to case control. It is generally expensive, time consuming, difficult to carry out. You need a sufficient time, as I said. Okay, you have to define your population, whether you are having population from Punjab, Haryana, and Himachal only, whether you have a population from south part of India, whether you are having population from northeast part of India, whether you are having population from different. These are supposed to be a genetically different population. You understand India, okay, the warfarin genomic algorithm established for South Indian patients cannot be applied to North Indians. So genetic differences exist. Okay, genetic differences exist for South India, North India. Okay, the Tibetan population, all those things. So you have to demarcate the population, whether all Indians will be included, whether North Indians will only be included, like that. It gives you more clarity when you present all these data in the manuscript. Okay, the quality increases and the chances of acceptability in the higher impact factor journal also increases. So you identify exposed subjects and non-exposed subject, you follow them up, you record the outcome endpoint, okay, and compare them in the relative risk, attributable risk, odds ratio. I have given you this sample abstract from PubMed. Okay. So this is a small study comparing duct tape therapy versus cryotherapy in treatment of common warts. Okay. They are saying it is a randomized study in children and it happened in military medical center, meaning that they have certain specific type of exposure, limiting generalizability of the result. Am I clear? Am I clear? If you are taking a population from prison, if you are taking a population from military center, if you are taking a population from age-old homes, okay, they have a specific set of exposures, okay? So generalizability of such a centers is little limited. Results, I'm saying. So in the results, they are saying they analyzed 51 patients, 85% in a duct tape therapy and 60% in cryotherapy had a complete resolution. They checked it with chi-square, okay? And they are saying duct tape therapy is better than the cryotherapy, okay? Are you going to follow this? Omit out the military medical center, omit out that particular factor. Are you still going to follow the result of this? This is PubMed published abstract. What questions come to your mind? It is a prospective study. It is a cohort study. They have done a good follow-up, at least 2 months, with a different kind of therapy for warts. Yeah. Any comments? So it is a very preliminary statistics that they have presented here. They could have gone very high number needed to treat calculation. They could have done it, okay? That could have increased the impact of the finding, okay? So it is up to you how you present your prospective data also, okay? So attributable risk is calculated as incidence among exposed minus incidence among non-exposed divided by incidence among exposed into 100, okay? You do a 2x2 table, okay, and you calculate all these parameters. Then absolute risk reduction you can calculate, okay, with a treatment versus control, with a bad outcome present, bad outcome absent. I would like to comment here upon number needed to treat, okay. How many patients are generally needed to treat, okay, to prevent one bad outcome, okay. Generally, it is said that if the figure is more than 15 or more than 10, it is bad. If it is less than 5, it is good, okay. So number needed to harm is also used in a vaccine trials, okay. So that is a kind of sophisticated stats you can present. Weaknesses are cohort studies are expensive, time consuming, okay. Confounding can occur because of controls, okay. Clinical trials provide the gold standard for determining relationship between the factor and the event, okay. You can have a randomized control trial, parallel design, sequential RCT, RCT with external control, non-randomized control trials, okay. So seeing individually, they can be simple or crossover study design. They can be field trials when you go into community, when you when you hold a particular number of schools and you see the vaccination and the adverse event, see the vaccination and the outcome, particular outcome, or you do it in a hospital setting, clinical setting, or in a lab setting, like COVID trials are going on. Okay. So as I said, randomization is easy to do with a Microsoft Excel. Blinding can also be decided, pre-specified in the protocol. Okay. Quality is decided by control when you give a baseline parameters matching table in the manuscript, okay, between your cases and control, their age, their body weight, their height, whether they have any p-value significant between the two groups or not. That has the duration of disease before enrollment, the duration of treatment before enrollment. All those things have to be decided in the control while selecting the control. Okay, so I'll talk about cross control. Crossover study trial. Okay, clinical trial. Before that, clinical trial is a comparative prospective experiment conducted in the human subject. You have to follow the declaration of Helsinki. Okay, do no harm. Okay, the beneficence and the other principles, that safety principles that you have to follow. Patient can serve as a own control in crossover study design. Okay, this is generally supposed to be without any defect, the crossover study design. Okay, the crossover study design I have shown here is, imagine that familial hyperlipidemia child comes. Imagine that a child with hyperlipidemia comes, and you want to subject that child to a particular drug, say ezetimibe or something like that. Okay, imagine, or any particular food diet type you can subject patient on. Because the hyperlipidemia is sufficiently chronic condition, it fits for crossover study design. Am I clear? You cannot study acute disease, acute disorder in a crossover setting. The disease has to be sufficiently long or a chronic disease. Hyperlipidemia, okay, can be evaluated for a different type of diets. You can subject to veg versus non-veg diet. You can subject them versus low-fat diet or a standard diet. Okay, and again, after a washout period, we call it as a washout period, after which you exchange the diet. Okay, what we achieved here is that the individual stands as a control for himself or herself. Okay, am I making sense? The individual stands as a control for himself or herself on two different time points. Okay, so that is considered to be an ideal setting when there can be a matching control confounders that are possible with the other parallel design. Okay, the only drawback of crossover study design is that there is a mention of carryover effect. Okay, carryover effect. If a patient has received best treatment first, okay, best treatment first, there may be a carryover effect. The effect of earlier treatment may be carried over to a worse treatment. Okay, so the assessment can be difficult in such a cases. Okay, you must have heard some names as a Quincy experimental studies. Here you assess the cases, whether they meet your inclusion exclusion criteria. You divide the patients into group 1 and group 2. Okay, according to severity also you can divide the patients. Okay, LGBS patients having UJ score less than 3, UJ score more than 4, like that. Then you create an intervention, physiotherapy plus plasmapheresis or plasmapheresis alone, like that. Okay, intervention. In no intervention, you just give them patient education or absence of that. Okay, all those kind of study designs you can decide. Okay, these are some fancy name block experimental study. You have cases meeting the entry criteria, mild, moderate, severe, group 1, 2, 3. You can decide a different treatment intervention for milder cases, different intervention for moderate cases, different intervention for severe cases. You can take an example of sepsis patient and accordingly you can decide the antibiotics or compare them with the standard of care. Okay, all those kind of interventions you can study. Okay, the strength is that it is a study design ideal for establishing causality, but ethical issues arise when you choose a comparator arm. Okay, you cannot keep a standard for all the comparators. Okay, so comparator, whether you keep it as a placebo, whether you mention a rescue treatment for placebo arm patient or a treatment arm patient, that matters the most. So there are various or huge number of ethical issues that arise with these particular trial designs. Currently, the innovative trial designs are umbrella and basket trials. Okay. Here, umbrella trial, you have multiple drugs for specific mutations that are linked to a specific tumor. And all those drugs are tested for that particular cancer in a different arm. Okay. So 4 drugs for a Wilms tumor, they are tested. Okay. It is an umbrella design. Okay. When you test one drug for a multiple cancers, okay, one drug for multiple disorders, then it becomes a basket trial. Okay. So these are certain designs that are mentioned. Then, as somebody was asking, platform trial or a pragmatic trial. You have heard about solidarity trial, COVID trial, the lopinavir, ritonavir arm, hydroxychloroquine arm, okay, azithromycin arm. The COVID patients were subjected to different therapies. Okay, all off-label drugs. The drugs, they are not mentioned as a guidelines for COVID management, but they are tried as an experimental design. It is like you present a platter. It is like you present a platter in front of patient. As per patient's wish, patient choose a particular drug. Okay. Am I making sense? You present a platter of medicines to a patient and patient choose which arm the patient wants to go. If the patients of particular arm, they are not tolerating a particular drug, okay, automatically that arm is dropped out during a complete trial, during execution of complete trial. If subjects are opting for more and more opting for one particular arm, that becomes the option, the drug of choice or drug of maximum safety for that particular patient population. Okay, that's how a platform trial or pragmatic trials are coming up. Okay, where these are also called as multi-arm trials. Multiple arms are there, multiple drugs are tried at a go. Okay, so that is one thing. And lastly, it depends upon type of question. Okay, whether you want to calculate burden of the disease, field trial. Okay, whether it just want to calculate a prevalence, a cross-sectional study, whether you want to calculate incidence, it is a longitudinal study. Okay, whether you want to establish a causation, okay, it is better done with the cohort and the RCT. The risk assessment prognosis can be answered a little by the case control study. The treatment efficacy is done in randomized control trial. Remember that it is not always a isolated efficacy you can comment upon. It is always a balance of efficacy and the safety. Okay, that is mentioned in the Western studies that you come across. The diagnostic test evaluation, the sensitivity analysis, the recipient operating curve for particular test, like whether you are opting for RT-PCR or antibody testing of COVID, that can be answered better in a randomized controlled manner. Cost effectiveness, it comes under observational study design. It can be a part of RCT also. In RCT, the cost is limited. Cost calculation is limited. Ideally, it should happen in outside setting, in an open setting, whether the compliance, whether the travel cost and other cost also making any difference, indirect costing and all. Okay, it is ideally calculated outside in the field type. Okay, so that is all from my side. Okay, we can move from case control to RCTs. Okay, thank you.
So the session is over. If you have any query, you can ask. You can unmute and ask your queries. Any query? Meenakshi ma'am?
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
So kindly explain regarding matched case control studies and nested case control studies. We have seen in our cities we conduct nested case control studies. So if you can just
Nested case control studies, you evaluate the exposure for cases completely, and you don't evaluate the exposure in control. I mean, you select a subsection of the control. It is a subgroup analysis sort of thing that is done in the nested case control studies. All controls may not have that exposure. Okay, so partial exposure is studied in nested.
okay, sir. Thank you.
Any other question? Busy ma'am? Any question? So if no question, so thank you very much. Now the session is over. So thank you very much, sir, for this wonderful lecture.
You can write to me anytime, any queries. I'll try to answer my best. Thank you. Thanks.